All right, the last category of dual deployments is the dreaded downplane. The one that scares everyone the most, as it should. You have one canopy going one direction, the other canopy going the other direction, and the result is a vertical descent towards the ground. Obviously, this could be fatal or could permanently injure you if you rode that all the way to the surface. One of the things we were wondering about is why do they sometimes downplane? Why do they sometimes biplane? Why do they sometimes side-by-side? And it was actually in a 1992 Army study, basically about using two ram air parachutes, that if either canopy had a slight defect that caused the slightest turn in either direction, the result was the 180 degrees apart downplane, or somewhere close to it. So line twists actually cause a turn, a broken line, a release brake, torn fabric, tension knots, all of those, the result is going to be a downplane instead of the biplane or the side-by-side. So we've just figured out what we have and why we have it. Do we still have to check for entanglement? Absolutely. Just because they're downplaning doesn't mean that one didn't pass through the other one before it got to that position. In fact, that might even be part of the reason why they're downplaning is because something has passed through something else. So yes, we still have to check for entanglement. Look at the risers, look at how they're crossing, look at where they're going. Always ask yourself, if I'm going to get rid of the main parachute, which we want to do when we can, where are the main risers going to go? Do they have a clean path to leave the situation? So if we're above 1,000 feet and we're 100% certain the canopies are not entangled, then we'll go ahead and just release the main parachute and let it go and then ride the reserve. At that point, the reason we use 1,000 feet is 1,000 feet is a pretty realistic number so that you have time to separate the canopies or determine if they've been entangled, still have time to get rid of the main, get control of the reserve, and find a safe place to land. Because typically when this happens, if you're in that situation, you might not have a lot of time. So if you do, absolutely. But both canopies are one in front and one behind. Usually that's a pretty good sign that they're not entangled, but not 100%. If they're a little bit crooked to your body position or to your main lift webs, well then that's usually a sign that maybe something has passed through something else. But once we're 100% certain, release it, get control of the main or the reserve, and land safely. So here he is, he's got his reserve open, and he's opening up this main with a bunch of line twists. The result is going to be the downplane. Don't pay too much attention to the jumper, just look at the canopies. And you can see how he's trying to bring them together right here, but then he doesn't maintain it. So he determines at this point that they're not entangled, that he can release the main parachute without endangering the reserve, and so he goes ahead and does that right here. And you can see he has a clean release right onto the reserve canopy. All right, the next video here, we have an intentional downplane that was done for military testing. We have two 360 square foot 9-cell canopies, reserve and main. The all-up weight on this jumper was 450 pounds. The whole point of this test was to see how fast the downplane would hit the ground. So there's a bunch of sensors on this dummy. We also released one brake on each side so that it wouldn't fly away. So here we go. So as you can see, it's spiraling a little bit, and that's because we released each brake. But even with two 360 square foot canopies, they're building up a lot of speed, and this thing hits the ground at 60 miles per hour. It didn't look like 60 to me, but that's what the device said. So, and then the second one there was just a reserve making a low turn. The biggest thing about the downplane is how it drives you straight into the ground. It doesn't allow you to roll the energy off in any direction. And for that reason, most people that ride a downplane end up with a lot of severe pelvis and lower body injuries, as well as a lot of times people are paralyzed from that particular situation. All right, so what if you're in the downplane, the canopies are some form of entanglement, or you find yourself below 1,000 feet where you just don't have time for a good inspection, separation, and getting control of a reserve, or you're just not 100% certain. Because remember, if you're not 100% certain and there was an entanglement and you release that main parachute, there's a really good chance it's going to completely collapse your reserve with it. So if you find yourself in this situation, what we have to do is take the vertical flight and create horizontal flight. And the way we do that is we take each of these canopies, the one in front and the one in back. And we take each one and we turn them towards each other on the same side. Could be off to the right, or depending on how you're situated in the harness, it may make more sense to do it off to the left. But either way, for that to be accomplished, what you have to do is, if I've got one in front, one in back, I'm going to reach up between the risers with this hand and grab the rear riser, which is on top in the back. Then I'm going to reach between the risers from the outside onto the rear riser, which is on the front canopy on top as well, and bring them in. And the more I make those canopies turn, the more they will end up above me until they touch. And when they touch, they are directly above you where you want them. Now, I was able to do this in a video you'll see in a moment. And it took me 8 seconds to do it. So I know it's doable, and I only lost 200 feet. Now, I was on really big canopies when I did it. I was on military parachutes without a full load of combat equipment. So it was lighter pressure on those risers. So because of that, I was able to pull those risers in and hold them and keep them together. Now, you may find yourself in this situation getting them together, but because of the entanglement or because of the condition of one canopy as opposed to the other canopy, you may have to keep them together. You may be in a continuous turn keeping them together. In which case, what you're doing is you're preventing the vertical by keeping the horizontal, but in this situation, you may not have much control over which direction you end up landing, because you may be in a turn all the way to the ground. You also may not have much control over exactly where you land. So that's another option. That's another thing you got to be aware of. But what you are controlling is you're controlling your vertical rate of descent. You're not screaming at the ground. You're in a slow turn reaching the surface. Now, if for some reason you are unable to do this with those rear risers, the next easiest option is to do the same thing with the toggles from that same rear risers and bring both of those toggles down, which you'll be about halfway. You'll release the brakes on that side, and then you got to bring them past halfway. The reason we got to bring them past halfway is we need those brake settings to be deeper than the brake setting on the other side, which we still have that brake set at half brakes. So we got to get them down past that to force those canopies to fly to that direction. Now, the reason I say this is another option is, one, those might be easier or might be accessible where the riser may not be, or the grip on the riser may be too slippery. Whereas if you've got those handles, you know you can get them to your body, get them down to your hip, grab onto your harness if you have to for extra support, and hold onto those toggles. Bring those canopies together, and then from there you could still steer that by pushing them in the direction you want them to go. Remember, with that side-by-side, we're always pushing the other canopy. We're pushing in the direction we want to go, never turning away, always pushing them together. All right, so that's our second way of creating a downplane into a side-by-side. The other two options we have are to create what's called, option 3 I would call this, would be to create a drag plane, where we take the brakes on the canopy that's in front of us, that we have access to the toggles, grab those toggles, bring them all the way down to your hips. Again, bring them as deep as you can without stalling the parachute, and you cause the front canopy to slow down more than the back canopy. And then you can get those canopies to some form of an angle other than vertical. The slower you can get this canopy, the more underneath you can get this other canopy. And as it gets underneath you, in canopy formation we call this a drag plane, because we're kind of dragging this other canopy underneath. In canopy formation, once this canopy gets underneath here, it starts to lighten up, and it starts to become easier to manage this one. So the slower we make this one go, the easier it is to manage the one below. Now, the last option is, if whatever I can't do, I cannot get these things to come together, I could try to pull one in. Whichever one seems to make the most sense to pull in, grab one of the toggles and just start reeling in steering line. Reeling it in, no matter how hard it is to pull. Keep reeling, keep reeling. Get fabric in your hand. The very back corner, one of those two back corners of that parachute, and then start rolling that fabric into your arms. Reeling it up and reeling it up. Bringing that drag away so that you can move back underneath your wing. And now you can control that wing. First of all, control the fabric. Use your harness to steer. Maybe get an arm out and keep a good grip on everything, and use a rear riser to steer. And then keep a good grip on this all the way to near the surface, 20 to 25 feet off the ground. Maybe 5 meters, 6 meters off the ground. And then let your hands free, grab your rear riser flare, and now you've been able to prevent that downplane from driving you into the earth. So in this video, I'm going to actually use the technique of pulling both canopies to one side to try to recover from the downplane. So as you'll see here, I was slick. I'm on a 360 and a 375, so I'm pretty light, very light wing loading. But it only took me 8 seconds and a total of 200 feet to get this thing to turn into a side-by-side. So here we go. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000. And now I can land that. I can steer it and I can land it. All right, in this case, this video, we've got the side-by-side that is, we're going to turn it into a downplane and just get rid of it. The reason this video is on here is I had line twists on the canopy on the left. So I squeezed the risers together, turned them, and brought the twist into the riser so that I can reach above the riser to create left on left of the left and separate the canopies. So you can see I've already brought the twist down, and here's the video starting now. Reaching above it on the left, right hand on the cutaway handle, separate, 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 cut away, let go. And you're good to go.